Have you ever wondered what really happened when Moses' staff turned into a serpent? That moment wasn't just a display of power, it was a divine confrontation, a clash between heaven's authority and the illusions of human pride. What if I told you that this ancient miracle reveals one of the deepest truths about God's call for purity, surrender, and faith? Today, we'll uncover what this event truly meant, and how it still speaks directly to your soul right now. Welcome to Divine War Stories, where ancient battles reveal eternal truths. Here, we don't just retell biblical events, we explore the spiritual wars behind them, the invisible struggles between flesh and spirit, pride and purpose, sin and sanctification. Subscribe and join us as we journey through Scripture to find the voice of Christ echoing through every story. When Moses stood before Pharaoh, staff in hand, it wasn't merely a man confronting a king, it was a servant of the Almighty confronting the arrogance of sin itself. The moment the staff became a serpent, the line between divine authority and human rebellion was drawn. Pharaoh's magicians tried to imitate the miracle, and for a moment, it looked like they succeeded. But then, Moses' serpent devoured theirs, a clear sign that what comes from God will always consume what comes from deception. It's a vivid reminder that no matter how convincing the world's imitations may seem, truth will always prevail over illusion. This event was not just about miracles, it was about revealing who holds true power. Egypt's magicians represented everything that stands in opposition to God: human intellect, pride, and sin disguised as enlightenment. Today, those serpents still slither through our culture. Ideologies that mock righteousness, pleasures that promise freedom but chain the soul. Yet, when Christ enters the heart, he doesn't merely compete with sin, he consumes it. His presence swallows up the darkness, leaving no space for the false gods we once served. The serpent was also symbolic. From Eden to Pharaoh's palace, the serpent represented deception. But in God's hands, even the symbol of evil bowed to his authority. This is what sanctification truly means, not the absence of temptation, but the surrender of every symbol of sin to the hands of Christ, who transforms it for his glory. Holiness isn't about being flawless, it's about allowing God to redefine what once defined us. The same staff that turned into a serpent would later part the sea, proving that God can use the very things that once represented fear to lead us toward freedom. We often see God's call to purity as a burden, but it's actually an act of love. He doesn't demand perfection because he knows we're dust, he calls us to walk with him, to stay close enough that his light keeps us from stumbling in the dark. Christ doesn't say, "Be holy," as a threat, he says it as an invitation. It's his way of saying, "Stay near me, for I am the only place your soul will find rest." To follow him is not to become flawless, but faithful. Holiness, then, is not the absence of mistakes, it's the presence of his mercy in our weakness. When Pharaoh hardened his heart, he became a picture of what happens when pride refuses to bend before God. Each plague that followed wasn't just judgment, it was mercy calling louder. God was showing that the longer we cling to sin, the more it enslaves us. Pharaoh's power crumbled, but Moses' obedience endured. And today, the same truth stands: the one who humbles himself before God will stand taller than any king who resists him. Sanctity begins when surrender replaces self-rule, when we drop our staff and let God show his power through it. Christ's call to live set apart isn't a command to withdraw from the world, it's a call to shine within it. Just as Moses walked among magicians yet carried heaven's authority, we are called to walk among temptation while remaining anchored in truth. Every act of kindness, every rejection of sin, every whispered prayer becomes like that staff, ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary when surrendered to God. When we let Christ guide our actions, the ordinary moments of our lives become stages for divine encounters. But why does Jesus insist on this path if he knows we can't be perfect? Because holiness isn't about achieving, it's about aligning. He desires our hearts, not our performance. Sin separates us from the very one who gave us life, and Christ's teachings are the map back to his presence. He commands purity not to control us, but to protect what is most sacred, our souls. Like a shepherd guiding his flock away from cliffs, Jesus calls us to purity to keep us from falling into destruction disguised as freedom. Every time Moses raised his staff, something miraculous happened. The Red Sea parted, water flowed from a rock, victory was secured. That same power still moves when believers lift their faith in obedience. But when we cling to sin, it's like gripping the staff but refusing to stretch it out. Faith without surrender is powerless. God doesn't need perfection to perform miracles. He needs willing hands. When you let Him turn your fear into faith, your pain into purpose, your weakness into worship, you'll see that the same God who transformed wood into wonder can transform your life too. In today's world, serpents still hiss, in addictions, in arrogance, in the quiet compromises that numb the spirit. But remember, every false power eventually gets swallowed by truth. When Christ enters, He doesn't negotiate with darkness, He conquers it. He doesn't decorate sin, He destroys its roots. And in that destruction, we find our freedom. Sanctity is not about never falling, it's about always returning to the one who lifts us again. Every step toward Christ is a step away from chains. So when God calls you to purity, don't see it as an impossible standard. See it as a divine rescue plan. Holiness isn't a wall that separates you from joy. It's a door that leads you to real peace. Just like Moses' staff, your life can become a vessel for God's authority if you let go and trust His hand. He's not asking you to be sinless. He's asking you to be surrendered. Because when your soul is His, no serpent, no Pharaoh, no sin can stand against you. When Moses stood again before Pharaoh, this time surrounded by plagues and chaos, he wasn't the same man who once trembled at the burning bush. He had learned that when God calls, weakness becomes strength. That's what Christ does in us too. He transforms fear into faith, shame into testimony. Every step of obedience becomes a spark of divine authority. The staff was never powerful by itself. It was powerful because it rested in the hands of a man who trusted God more than himself. In the same way, your life, surrendered, purified, aligned, becomes a weapon against darkness. But there's a warning hidden in that story. Not everyone who witnesses God's power changes. Pharaoh saw miracles that defied logic, yet his heart grew harder. Today, we live in a generation surrounded by wonders. Lives transformed, grace revealed, mercy renewed every morning, yet many still harden their hearts. Holiness begins when we stop resisting God's voice. When we say, "Lord, I'm tired of pretending," He begins the transformation. The same God who split the sea is ready to split open your heart, not to destroy it, but to fill it with living water. Christ calls us to live differently, not to boast of moral superiority, but to show what redemption looks like. The world doesn't need perfect people. It needs authentic ones who carry light even while walking through shadow. When we fall, we rise because He rose. That's the essence of spiritual purity, not sinlessness, but sincere pursuit. Jesus doesn't look for polished hearts. He looks for surrendered ones. The miracle of Moses' staff reminds us, the moment we place what we have in God's hands, He turns the ordinary into instruments of deliverance. Sin promises freedom but always ends in slavery. Egypt glittered with wealth and power, yet its foundation was built on chains. Pharaoh thought he ruled the world, but he was ruled by pride. The same happens to us when we let sin dictate our choices. It becomes a silent ruler, whispering lies that keep us far from God. Christ came not just to forgive sin but to break its dominion. His blood didn't just wash away guilt, it shattered the power that once enslaved us. That's why He calls us to walk in purity, because only the free can truly love. Every time Moses stretched his staff, he was proclaiming faith in action. Faith isn't a feeling, it's a decision to trust when everything shakes. When Christ asks us to walk in righteousness, He isn't demanding perfection, He's inviting partnership. He wants to move through you, just as He moved through Moses. And though we fail, grace restores. The key is to keep the staff in His hands, to keep your heart in His presence. That's where transformation happens. Not in religious performance, but in relationship. If you've ever felt unworthy, remember this. Moses was once a murderer, afraid and exiled. Yet God chose him. Why? Because God sees not who you were, but who you can become when you surrender. The same God who turned a staff into a serpent and then into a sign of victory can take your past mistakes and rewrite them into testimonies of grace. Holiness begins when we stop defining ourselves by sin and start defining ourselves by His mercy. What matters isn't where you've been, but whose hands you're now in. This is the beauty of the gospel. God takes what's broken and makes it holy through his presence. The call to live pure isn't about religion, it's about relationship. When Christ said, "Be perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect," he wasn't setting an impossible goal, he was revealing a direction, a journey of becoming more like him each day. He knows we'll stumble, but he never stops walking beside us. He's not ashamed of your progress, he celebrates your persistence. The serpent in your past doesn't scare him, he already conquered it on the cross. So when you feel tempted or weary, remember that holiness isn't about isolation, it's about illumination. You're not called to escape the world, but to shine in it. Moses didn't run from Egypt, he faced it with divine authority. Christ calls us to do the same, to confront darkness not with pride, but with compassion, truth, and love. The most powerful testimony isn't perfection, it's transformation. When people see what Christ has done in you, they'll recognize the same power that turned wood into a miracle working in your soul. And this is why Christ insists on purity. It protects the most valuable thing you have, your soul. Everything else fades, status, success, strength, but your soul is eternal. That's why he fights for it. That's why he disciplines, redeems, and restores. Because he knows what's at stake. The miracle of the staff wasn't about magic, it was about authority. When you let him rule your heart, your life becomes a declaration, God reigns here. And when he reigns, sin loses its throne. That's when true freedom begins. So, if this message spoke to you, don't let it end here. Open the scriptures. Let God's voice teach you personally. Seek a church that truly preaches Christ, one that loves people, serves the broken, and cares for the poor and forgotten, just as Jesus did for the orphans and widows. Don't chase perfection. Chase his presence. And if you ever feel lost, remember Moses' staff. It was once just a stick, but in God's hands, it became a symbol of deliverance. Your life can become that too. Stay in his light, walk in his truth, and let his love transform everything.